Now, how do I make it go away?
I don't know.
Aaron?
You can drag it to the right side of the screen, we'll go up on the sides.
Oh, okay.
Should anyway. Yeah, it's only going up now.
No. I thought there was a way to minimize it. Well, all right.
So
Probably won't bother
if
anything up
you
there.
if you're using it as an extended desktop, it won't show up on that screen. But I think what you're doing is you're duplicating the laptop screen, right? That's why it's showing up. Well, these guys need this one. Well, it shouldn't hurt anything up there. It was titles. So can they hear? Right, you're right. Can they hear? Right where?
They got the ones that sit in the back that you're worried about shooting spitballs at you from the back.
Can the online guys hear and see it?
They get in front of it, you know.
Okay. See how far away it is. Whoa.
Oh, I thought it's already.
Well, recording as you know it.
All right, where'd my mouse go?
Except the 12-hour recording.
I can't see it. It's over here.
There you are.
Getting to it quick.
Okay. All right, resonance. Does everybody know what resonance is?
I think that's what I put on the surfboard when I'm building it with the cloth.
Oh. Very close. It's a RLC circuit where the capacitive and the inductive reactances are equal, so they cancel out.
I thought resonance is where there was no reactor.
So they cancel out. They're equal.
That's true, yeah.
And the capacitive reactance is negative on the complex plane, and inductive is positive. If it's the same value, they're equal to 0. So the impedance is going to be R plus 0, but only at resonance. And what's happening at resonance is you're storing energy in the capacitor. And as it charges up, when the current stops, that energy starts dissipating and goes into the inductor and stores energy in the magnetic field in the inductor, and then that collapses and it comes back. So it just sits there transferring energy back and forth. And if they're perfect components, there's no loss. So they'll resonate forever. But in the real world, you have to add a little gain or something to offset the losses. Those are the formulas for inductive reactance, 2πfL. In college, I learned it as omega L. We always like to shorten things, so omega is equal to 2πf. It's the radiant velocity. And capacitive reactance is the reciprocal. It's 1 over omega c. So when it's resonant, XL will equal XC. And if you work that out, okay, you can derive what F is equal to, which is the resonant frequency when they're equal. So it's equal to 1 over 2 pi times the square root of LC. Did everybody bring a calculator of some form or fashion? Because some of these are the ones where you act, unless you're really, really good, you will need to calculate. Now, of course, this is a little circuit I did in Circuit Lab just to demonstrate. It's a series RLC circuit. And this is the plot that you get. You see the blue line at the top is the inductive reactance, and you see it's increasing with frequency. And the yellow, orange, whatever color that is decreasing with frequency. That's capacity reactance. Where they cross is the resonant point. They're equal. And the plot on the bottom is showing the impedance of this circuit looking in. So you see it essentially goes to zero. That we're looking at, and I did it on the downside of the resistor, so you're just seeing the LC. So it looks like perfect resonance circuit.
I would expect nothing less from you, Bob.
Okay. We're gonna do it in parallel. It's
But
not-
Byron, it was resonated at 100 kilohertz. That's a hell of an antenna to need.
Actually, I think it was 159.
So,
He's talking to submarines and
I
whales.
think so, yeah.
He's loading up a barbed wire.
But at 150 hertz, that's British submarines. The American ones are at 40 hertz. So.
Okay, here's the same kind of plots for the parallel circuit. You see that the impedance or resistance goes essentially to infinity. It was a perfect components. And where the impedances cross is where it's resonant. Any questions so far on resonant stuff? That's how antennas work too. Is that right, Byron?
We hope
Although they don't have to be resonant.
that's true.
Okay. So what is resonance in an LC or RLC circuit? First one to answer gets a donut.
Charlie,
The frequency at which the capacitive reactance equals the inductive reactance. What is the resonant frequency of an RLC circuit? If R is 22, L is 50 microhenries, and C is 40 picofarads. Now, for most people, this takes a calculator. Unless you know the sheet. Oh, by the way, those calculators I recommended you can use in the exams. You can't use your cell phone as a calculator, take the exam. Or one that has a lot, stored memory unless you show that it's been cleared.
I'm gonna go Bob with the some people. Bravo, anyone for Bravo? Charlie. Oh, you're going Charlie, okay.
You
You
several
sound
Charlies.
like an engineer.
Now, sometimes it takes getting used to the calculator to do some of these the right sequence. Sometimes I think it's easier if you just do it like 5 times 10 to the minus fifth and 4 times 10 to the minus 11th. And
Yeah, well, conversions to the formulas in Henry's and Farads, so you guys can work that over first. However, the frequency then is in hertz. So
But you notice that R is 22 ohms. What does that mean?
it means the impedance is 22 ohms.
It means absolutely nothing with the resonant frequency.
Right, so he said about the frequency is on the
All right, who got C?
So on the test, this isn't always the case, don't rely on this, but look at 4 frequencies, which one's in the handgun?
Oh.
Not always true. 80 meters or 75 meters.
Yeah, on these exams, in most cases, there's 2 of the answers which are obviously wrong. So you're kind of down to, you don't know a guessing between 2 possibilities. And if you just kind of estimate things, you can kind of do an educated guess.
There you go.
And this is a plot of that circuit. I can't read it from here. Is that reading volts or ohms?
Looks like
Ohms,
ohms on the
ohms.
side, yeah. Yeah, 5K ohms.
What is the resonant frequency of an RLC circuit? If R is 33, L is 50 microhenries, and C is 10 picofarads.
Let's try Jack's, deal, let's say delta.
The kilohertz was, that's too low, pretty sure that's not even told me.
Yeah.
I said, well, rely on it, do the math anyway. So read it quickly enough, you might skip the kilohertz.
Right.
But because they have you practice with the exam questions when you're online, you can learn little tricks like that, because usually, like Bob said, two answers just way out in left field.
Usually. And of the remaining two, one of them will be close to your answer you estimated, the other one will be pretty far off.
And one of them's magnitude, so 7.12 is a magnitude,
And the other thing to watch is, they'll do stuff like this where some of the answers are megahertz and some are kilohertz. And when you work it, you may come out with megahertz, but the right answer is in kilohertz, you gotta convert it. When I do it on my calculator, I come out in hertz. So then I have to convert to whatever it's. Delta.
Is convert like transitioning? I've been hearing a lot about that recently.
Yeah. All right, any questions so far? It's just using your calculator and remembering that formula. And if you forget it, you can derive it from setting the two reactances equal and solve for F. Oh, by the way, you should all know when you take the exam, you can write anything you want on the back of the answer sheet. If there's stuff like that you have trouble remembering, write it down as soon as you start. All right. Series and parallel resonance. Impedances. In a series RLC circuit, the impedance at resonance is approximately equal to the circuit resistance. In other words, the series resistor. Because the inductor and capacitor in series appear as 0 ohms if they're perfect components. So the current through the series circuit is going to be maximum, basically limited by the series resistance. In a parallel RLC circuit, it's just the reciprocal, basically. And the way you figure it out is you treat the reactances, since they're in ohms, just like you do parallel resistors. So it's the reciprocal of the sum of the reciprocals. And in this case, when you take 1 over x of L minus 1 over x of C, and x of L is equal to x of C, they cancel out. So you get the impedance is equal to R. And the current is going to be minimum because it looks like the LC components look like an open circuit in parallel with whatever the parallel resistance is. So that's why it's approximately equal. It will be, depending on the Q, which we'll get to later, it will be slightly less than the parallel resistance.
So you're saying we have a notch filter with a parallel circuit?
I guess it would be a very sharp notch. Isn't that why they use them as traps on antennas?
Ooh.
Is that right?
But usually the trap is not set at the frequency, it's usually set above or below the frequency you want. Yeah, now I'm confused.
And it's probably not a high Q circuit. And here's more plots again, because I pay $5 a month for circuit lab. In our series circuit, you can see where the impedance is essentially going down to 0. I think it's showing it like 1 ohm. I'm not sure why. But that was just the impedance calculated on the LC part of the circuit. In the parallel circuit, you see it goes up approaching infinity, and that would be in parallel with whatever the resistor was. Okay. What's the magnitude of the impedance of a series RLC circuit at resonance?
I don't know.
Charlie? We got a Charlie.
Yeah, I don't know.
Michael, you're being quiet.
Yeah, I am, but I'm looking at D, it says approximately equal to circuit resistance.
Yeah.
And that's what we talked about at resonance. That it's about what the resistance is.
Yeah.
Equal to or less than. So you think it's delta?
I think it's delta.
Delta. 2 deltas, 1 Charlie. Delta. Remember the impedances or reactances cancel one another. So all you got left in the impedance equation is the resistance. And any resistance that's in the components themselves, the inductor and capacitor in the real world will have some resistance. I think they call it ESR and capacitor, effective series resistance. What's the magnitude of the impedance of a parallel circuit at resonance?
It's going to be the same thing, the circuit resistance.
Same thing.
Hey,
And you can work out the reciprocal of the reciprocals and prove it.
If they notice the at resonance and reactances cancel out, we always left them circuit resistance or it's series overlap.
Right. It's just how you get there. Whether you approach it from a low impedance to whatever the series or the resistor is, or a high impedance to whatever the resistor is. So the parallel LC circuit, when it's resonant, because of the high impedance, looks like an open circuit. So there's very low current flow. However, between the inductor and capacitor, you can have very high voltages and currents circulating. And they cancel, they're out of phase, so they essentially cancel one another out. What's the magnitude of the current at the input of a parallel RLC circuit at resonance? And they're only at resonance.
So parallel is going to be.
whoa.
Okay, so that's gonna be.
Millennium. Any alphas out there? All right. What's the magnitude of the circulating current within the components of a parallel LC circuit at resonance? Remember, this is the energy going back and forth between the inductor and the capacitor. So when the magnetic field collapses, it creates a current going back into the capacitor and charges it up and back and forth. So you've got current back and forth. Did I back up?
You get backed up.
Yeah.
The wrong button.
I thought it was gonna be accidents.
There we go. Ba, 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 ba.
Key of those two questions, you gotta pay attention to is the. Go back on the A, is the input current versus a circulating current. You know, if you get those off the test, because the input is minimum, the circulating current is maximum. So really watch the
So,
wording on those two questions.
any questions so far?
What, more about what you were saying? At the input, what's?
Go back to question A, Bob. On the wording of it. You back up there. So, yeah.
Can I do back arrows? Would that work?
Oh, yeah, you can do it there.
Oh, no, it doesn't do anything.
Get that pop up. See,
Okay, go down the just scroll down the previews.
There's no cursors.
Where's the trackpad? Those things I hate.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
questions.
See, Michael's being a good teacher, Pat.
Maybe this will work again.
And yet,
Hit escape or whatever, get rid of that pop up, sometimes that prevents the announcement. Yeah. There you go.
That the one you wanted?
I think so.
No, looks like we're still going forward.
We didn't get there yet. Yeah.
One more
Yeah.
back, yeah. Okay. Yeah. Just on the question, what is the magnitude of the current at the input? Double parallel. Okay, where you go forward, you'll see what's the magnitude of the circulating current in a parallel, so both parallel circuits. That are representing what the input current is.
You have somebody trying to log in here.
Wanna let that guy in?
Sure. Who is it? Oh, Chuck Cole. Chuck Cole.
But the input current is minimum, circulating current is max.
good morning, Chuck.
Okay,
Chuck, can you hear us?
in a resonant,
And what is a parallel resonance.
parallel.
Can anybody on the link hear us okay?
You have muted.
Uh,
Well, he can unmute himself. I don't, you don't have the participants up. It blocks part of the screen.
it says there's 4 of them out there.
Yeah, we
Just
don't.
click on that.
Yeah, I can hear everybody just fine.
Oh, good.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I know what, could I ask a question now? It was my problem
Sure.
here. I'm looking at the best way, the strategy to pass this. I noticed that, I did last night, I didn't get through the whole thing. I went through the book and it seemed like we are going through the book. And so in terms of preparing to take the test, I go through and answer these questions and then I understand them. And then I have a good chance of passing, right? I mean, that gives me a certain percentage of opportunity to pass, right?
Correct.
Now, I had a question about the formulas. When I go to, you had a set of formulas at the beginning. So what I would be curious though, what formulas do I need to commit? Commit to memory when I take the test. I know you say some of them you can kind of derive it. So
Right.
for all the formulas you presented in the beginning are the ones I need to put to memory for the most part, on how to, I'll figure out how to derive them, and I'll be safe for the test
Right. You
for
need
this section.
to know inductive reactance and capacitive reactance, resonant frequency, which you can derive from those two. Obviously, Ohm's law, Watt's power law, we'll get to in a bit. Let's see. That's all I can think of off the top of my head, but I think there's some other ones coming up in a bit.
Okay,
Some trigonometry type dealing with power factor, cosines and tangents. But if you understand trigonometry, that ought to be easy. Why am I getting that look from Rick?
Because we all did trigonometry 50 years ago. Hey, come on, Bob.
Yes, an awful lot of this stuff I haven't done for 50 years either. The other thing that you need to do besides figuring out what to commit to memory is go online and do some of the practice exams. There's probably a half a dozen of them out there that are free. Even the ARL one, well, not for extra. You have to be a member to do the extra one on the ARL site. But you need to practice those until you get up around 90% and you're good. Okay, where were we? Oh. This is just showing I was trying to show the circulating currents basically in that circuit. You can see that they're 180 degrees out of phase, so they're canceling one another out. I guess those are voltage plots, plus and minus 20. And it's like a 1 volt input. So you can see how much the voltage is increased in a resonant circuit. What can cause the voltage across reactances in a series RLC circuit to be higher than the voltage applied to the entire circuit? And it's the main thing we've been talking about. I heard alpha. Another alpha.
You gave. I would have thought it'd be bigger.
You would?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Oh. Good old resonance. Makes the world go round. Oh, and by the way, there's a site I found, Kathy Loves Physics. If anybody is interested in the historical stuff about all this stuff, and it's really good. She goes through all the different, Ampere and Faraday and Maxwell and everybody and Tesla, how all this stuff came about, who actually invented it and who got credit for it, and all that kind of stuff.
But you gotta be sure you spell physics right, because there's a lot of Kathy Loves websites.
Yes. But this one's quite good. And she's good. In this one, we're showing the phase change. When you see the what is the yellow line? Voltage? Or I can't read it.
Current.
So the current is 90 degrees out of phase at the lower frequency. At resonance, okay, it starts changing phase. It's 0 along with the voltage at resonant, and then it goes negative again. What that means, it's inductive at the low frequency. It becomes capacitive at the high frequency. And I have trouble getting those straight. But I know the right answer on the tip. What's the phase relationship between the current through and the voltage across a series resonant circuit at resonance? We want to know the phase relationship between the current and the voltage on the circuit.
They're 100 out of place,
I was gonna say B,
180.
No. Remember the previous chart?
Okay, so,
What happened at the resonant point?
oh. In phase.
And that's the only time they're in.
Yeah.
Okay, in the real world, we have series resistance with inductors and capacitors. So they came up with this term, the Q factor, quality factor, which technically is the ratio of the energy stored in the component divided by the energy dissipated. Okay, so if it was lossless, the Q is going to be infinite. But in the real world, there will always be some resistance, so you're going to have some loss. So to find the Q of a parallel circuit, we divide the resistance by the capacitive or inductive reactance. It doesn't matter because they're equal at resonance. If it's a series circuit, we divide the reactance by the resistance.
So if you have your amp tuned up and it's a tube amp, energy dissipated is what you jack on.
Yeah.
which is just what you need here in Melbourne, right? Yeah.
So anybody have trouble wrapping their head around that one?
Which is why you get transistors and not tubes in for your amplifier.
Okay. So I'll have all that heat from the film. How is the Q of an RLC parallel resonant circuit calculated?
See.
I heard a Charlie.
A second, Charlie.
Seconded to Charlie.
Third Charlie.
And it's Charlie. Resistance divided by the reactance.
Look at this question again, so on the answers. A and D say resistance and inductance will multiply. It's not a multiplier, series or parallel, it's reactance over resistance or resistance over reaction, it's always divided by, so I can just remember that Q is divided by, that narrows it down to two answers. Then you just gotta remember there's reactance on top and resistance on the bottom, or vice versa.
Right.
Depending on the series you parallel.
The series makes sense. I mean, it's very obvious. Parallel is the one that confuses people where you just do the reciprocal of it, basically. How is the Q of an RLC series resonant circuit calculated?
So which two aren't the right answers?
No, I was ancient gas. That's an odd use of passes, sir.
I think it's A.
Your alphas?
Something, Mike.
Say again, I'm sorry.
I think you're on to something.
I don't know. Oh,
Hmm.
there's a question down there.
No, I think he said that he would put his hand up for alpha. Right?
Oh, okay, okay.
All right. Everybody following so far?
Yeah, because those are the two formulas I
Okay. High cube circuits tend to behave more like the ideal resonant circuit because they have very low loss. This should have highlighted, that's the key there is lower resistive losses in the circuit. They'll have very high internal voltages and circulating currents, the higher the Q. In that earlier chart, you saw where with 1 volt in, we were getting plus or minus 20 volts across the inductor and capacitor. And that was not an extremely high Q circuit. The downside for high Q is due to those high voltages and currents, you've got to choose the components so they can withstand those voltages and currents. So which of the following increases Q for inductors and capacitors? Remember the basic definition, Q is the ratio of energy stored divided by energy dissipated.
Or losses, right?
I hear an alpha. Lower loss.
So for magnetic loops, usually if you're going to transmit on them, you have to have much more beefier components in it for the tuning and everything. And is that for kind of involved in this with the, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, but I just happen to think about that.
I don't know for sure, but you definitely appear to have much higher, I assume they're fairly high Q. I mean,
Yeah, that's part of the put of reference.
which is why you have, the vacuum capacitors
Right.
that withstand the voltages.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, last question, you said IQ, which means high efficiency. Of course, you know, we're watching.
Right.
They just gave it away.
Okay. Yeah, if you really need to read the questions carefully, there's usually some clues in there if you really pay attention to the question. Let's see, did we do this one? What's the effect of increasing Q?
No, I interrupted you.
Cal,
Sure, Charlie.
That's what we just said. Exactly.
so, I really had to consider this well because for a while I was into, magnetic loops. And the way you get a good magnetic loop, 10th wave leap, 8th wave, like 10 pun. Here's definitions, you get the resistance down super low. Okay. And once you get it to resonance, a 5 watt QRP transmission can get up about 9,000 volts up on your loop.
That's high Q.
Yeah. If you have good income.
Okay. Half power bandwidth. We use the Q to determine the half power bandwidth of a series or parallel circuit. And it's defined in I don't really like the wording there, but in a series circuit, it's the bandwidth that will pass half the power of the input signal. So in other words, the skirts of that waveform at the minus 3 dB point on each side is going to determine the half power bandwidth. And in a parallel resonance circuit, it rejects half the power because its waveform is basically just the opposite. So the formula is the frequency divided by the Q. It's fairly simple. So we'll see examples. What's the half power bandwidth of a resonant circuit? Has a resonant frequency of 7.1 megahertz and a Q of 150. Now, I need a calculator. Q.
And again, the hertz, what the heck, you're not gonna be transmitting.
It's gonna be kilohertz.
I really don't know.
Well, actually, when I worked on my calculator,
Charlie.
I came out with the answer in hertz and had to convert.
Yeah,
Well, I'm looking at, 4 150s is 600s. 5 would be 750, so one would be between, 4 and 5. And I see one answer between 4 and 5.
no, but a band with that narrow for half of the power.
Could be in a very high Q. So,
But yeah, Q of 150 is pretty high.
Six, no,
it's possible for this thing.
47.3 kilohertz. So for the 40-meter band, that's pretty narrow. Don't get too many SSB signals in there.
and that's the plus or minus figure. Or is that the total bandwidth?
That's the
Total bandwidth.
Ooh, yeah, that is.
So that's what you would get with a magnetic loop anyway,
Bandwidth.
right?
Yeah,
That's basically what you get.
yeah, loops are wonderful if you don't like band hopping and frequency hopping.
If you don't like radiation exposure,
Ah,
if you gotta get next to it to tune it,
ah,
unless you can afford a remote one.
You're running QRT, you're fine.
Yeah.
What's the half power bandwidth of a resonant circuit? Has a resonant frequency of 3.7 megahertz and a Q of 118. Same problem, different numbers.
yeah, Charlie.
There's one number that goes 3.7 divided by 118 has got to be 3.
So
So
31.
the rest of it's immaterial. This is
Charlie again.
What did you say?
I believe it's Charlie again.
Yeah,
There you go, Charlie's
or
answer.
Cal.
Yeah, 3.7, like you said, divided by 118. And it's gotta be around 3 or something. Okay. Sometimes we use resonant circuits as an impedance match, either between two circuits in a receiver, transmitter, or to match your transmitter to your antenna. And bandwidth becomes a factor, so obviously Q does. And there's calculators out on the web for doing pi and t matching networks to do this, and you plug in your parameters, one of which being the Q you want to determine the bandwidth. So that's why it shows up here. So the bandwidth is again frequency divided by Q. And if you increase the Q, you're going to obviously decrease the bandwidth that it can match over. Likewise, if you decrease it, it's going to increase the bandwidth. If you had a Q of essentially 0, have great bandwidth, but you can have all loss. You're like a dummy load. What's the result of increasing the Q of an impedance matching circuit?
I think yeah.
Okay. Did you just crash? No. Sorry. It's time to stop and start. I'm Oh, yeah.